So look, could there be a better time for this discussion? We are on the cusp right now of the old world of direct payments and BPS, and we're down to about half of what they were now this year, and the introduction of this substantive bit of SFI. I hope we're going to hear the details, the fine details of that soon, but yeah, SFI's been around for a year or two, but actually we're about to get to the meat of it. This is where the real money is. And yeah, let's be clear, the desperate ambition for SFI is to have 70% of farmers in it and a lot of the budget in it. So we're talking hundreds of millions of pounds, maybe £1 billion. This matters. There's a lot of money here, there's a lot of things to go at. So if nothing else, we need to be looking at it and understanding what it means for us. This is a journey that all started 60 years ago with Michael Gove saying public money for public goods, and that food was not a public good. We've now evolved into a range of environmental schemes. The questions now are, will they fold around productive farming and support and incentivise farmers, or will they compete to drive land out of production for questionable environmental benefit? We're about to find out, but let's perhaps tease out some of those questions this morning. So first of all, we are going to have a quick introduction from both of our speakers. Janet will go first, and then we'll open up to questions afterwards. Plenty of questions. Let's have a great debate. Let's not have statements, please. Let's have questions and hear the thoughts and minds of our two speakers. Okay, thank you very much, Janet.
Hi everybody, I'm Janet, as David says. Really good to see you here today. What a great show, what lovely weather, and I've been having some great conversations with farmers. Right, I'm alright now. I'm at the time of life where I stand up too quickly. I get very dizzy. So, I'm the director of the farming programme in DEFRA, where what we're doing is phasing out all of the aspects of the Common Agricultural Policy, basic payments, as I'm sure you're very well aware, and introducing a new approach to environmental land management schemes, support for the sector for productivity, innovation, research and development, and better farming regulation. And before I get into any of that, I just want to say a bit about the context that we're operating in here. And the first thing to say is we know and respect and understand that your primary role is that you are running businesses and you are producing usually food, but other products as well. And what we're not trying to stop you doing that, or make you choose between doing that and doing something else. What we're trying to do is achieve three sets of outcomes, all at the same time. One is we want to maintain domestic food production and food security. The second is we want a thriving farming sector and farm businesses. And thirdly, we want to see those farm businesses who take care between them of 70% of the land in this country also delivering biodiversity improvements, water quality improvements, improvements to the climate, and air quality improvements, and that's a big ask of the sector. And we want to do those things all together, and a lot of what we're doing is often aimed at doing several of those things all at the same time. So a lot of what we're asking you to do is designed to both help you produce food, help you have a sustainable, resilient business, and also help preserve, conserve, and improve the environment. And we're doing a number of different things to achieve that. We're first and foremost, and most importantly, trying to improve the service that we provide to you. So we want to have a grown-up relationship with you. We want to show you the sort of respect that you rightly deserve and have not always felt from us in the past. And for that, we need to be business-like in our operations and do things in a timely, effective, efficient way and not tie you up in all kinds of complicated bureaucracy. And we need to be fair and not be punishing you for things that don't matter whilst ignoring things that do matter. So we're reforming our approach to farming regulation to make it much more fair, proportionate and effective where it matters. We're improving our schemes, so just for an example, if you apply for Countryside Stewardship now or SFI, it used to take us 6-7 months or longer to get back to you to tell you if you're in the scheme or not. We now do it within 2 weeks and often a lot quicker. And that's the sort of business-like approach that you ought to be able to expect from us, not waiting for months on end to hear from us. And that requires us to transform our policy and our technology and our delivery. We know we're not there yet. We've made some progress. We've got a lot more to do, but that's what we're all about in terms of improving our services. And unless we do that, you're not going to engage in the rest of the stuff, and we know that, because it won't make business sense for you to do so. It'll be much too risky. So we're doing that with all our services across regulation and schemes, and then we're also improving and expanding our environmental land management schemes. We've got 3 schemes that you may be aware of. If you want to do long-term, large-scale environmental conservation type activity alongside your farming, then landscape recovery is for you. And if you've heard that that's just for big estates or charities, that's not the case. Almost all of the projects that we're funding for landscape recovery are actually groups of farmers working together, continuing to farm, and also taking care of their water courses or their habitats or nature in some other way. So that's open for applications now for another round of projects. They're bespoke projects and they're competitive. but they are expected to last for in excess of 20 years. We'll work very closely with you over that period to help you deliver successful results, attract private finance, and really make a difference. That's not going to be for most people though. The scheme that's for most people are Sustainable Farming Incentive, which is all about actions that you can do in a self-service way. You don't need to take advice about them in the sense that you don't need consent in order to do them from your landlord or anybody else. And they're things that you can do in the course of your farming, which can help you reduce your costs, improve your farm resilience, and improve nature and make better use of the natural resources available to you as well. And a lot of those things are things that are good business practice anyway. Many farmers are already doing them. What we want is to enable more farmers to do those practices and do them really well. And SFI is designed to take some of the cost out of that for you, some of the risk out of that for you, so that you can adopt those practices. And as David says, we've got an initial offer for the Sustainable Farming Incentive available now. We've learned a lot from that initial limited offer about how this scheme needs to work, and the offer that we're now putting forward is much broader, covers a much wider range of actions, so you can combine them all to make it stack up in a way that's going to work for your farm. Much more flexible, so you're not required to do bundles of actions together. You can pick and mix whichever things you want to do. There's no requirement about what percentage of your land you put in or take into actions. You can just pick which actions do you want to do, how do you want to combine them on your farm. And that will be open for applications this summer, and we'll be publishing the final details of that scheme very shortly in the next week or two, and that will set out what the options are, how much you can get paid for them, how you can combine them on your land, how you can combine them with existing schemes, and all sorts of other information. The list is already available, and the DEFRA stand is just down the way there, so do pop in if you want to talk about that. And then the final scheme is Countryside Stewardship, which already exists, and is a scheme that is much more popular now than it was 3 or 4 years ago, and much more straightforward to operate with, and much fairer in terms of the controls that we have, where instead of just immediately penalising you if you find something not quite right, the first step is to have a conversation, a grown-up conversation about what's gone wrong here, how might you put it right, because we're trying to have that adult relationship. And that scheme, we're going to expand the scope, offer a wider range of options, and continue to make it more flexible so you can add more things in each year. You can do the mix of things that you want to do that makes sense on your farm, and you can take a less prescriptive approach so that you can decide what's the best way to achieve the things that are needed on your particular farm. So we're doing lots of things to try and improve these schemes and make them much more attractive and workable for you, because as David says, we want to see 70% of farmers taking part in these schemes so that we can achieve those outcomes of maintaining food production over the long term, having resilient, thriving businesses, and enhancing the environment. And then the final set of offers is one-off grants, which we're offering for productivity, innovation, research, development, slurry management, water management, animal health and welfare, and those are capital grants designed to help you to make your business resilient, take care of your resources in an effective way, become more efficient, etc. And there's lots of information down the DEFRA stand about what's there. The way we're doing this, we have made a decision that instead of providing absolute certainty right now, which if we did that would be wrong, and setting things in stone, which is how we used to do things, and then not being able to change them and not being able to adapt them, you probably wouldn't do that on your farm, set a plan for 10 years and then make no changes regardless of the weather. And we're trying to take the same approach here. So you will see things changing and developing. What we're trying to show you is that we're listening to what you've got to say, and we learn and adapt and improve these schemes. So the SFI offer this year is very different to the offer last year because of the feedback that we've had from farmers through NFU, Farming Forum, and plenty of others who have told us what it's going to take for these things to work. So if you're ever asked to contribute views to this stuff, we are listening to what you've got to say. And the reason we're listening to what you've got to say is not because we're nice, obviously we are very nice, but that's not the reason. The reason is because if these things don't work for you, you're not going to do them, and then it's not going to work. So this money, this 2.4 billion a year in England, is for the farming sector to achieve these outcomes. And if it doesn't work for you, then it doesn't work. So this sort of engagement and hearing from you about what works for you and what doesn't is mission critical, and being prepared to flex and adapt our approach is really important for us. So really looking forward to hearing your questions and comments today. But now that we're all friends, you know who we are. If you see anybody in one of these very attractive looking great t-shirts around the place, and there are a few here, then you can hit us up for a chat if you want to get into a bit more detail. If you want some free business planning advice to look at these options, then you can access that through the Resilience Fund. There's a range of providers there who are able to come to your farm and offer you advice about what the right options might be for you. But also, if you see things and you think, well, that's not going to work, then we want to know. We won't please all of you all the time, I'm afraid, because guess what, we don't all agree with each other, and not all your farms are the same. But we do our best to respond to feedback as best we can, and we're always keen to do it. So let us know if you don't get a chance to ask some questions today. Then we all exist on the internet and in real life, and you can get to it wherever you like. All right, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jen. Clark, would you like to take the floor?
Good morning. I've been asked to speak today really about my experience of SFI pilot, CSS and SFI proper as such a scheme now, but I'll keep it quite brief. I think there's more value in many questions that we have for Janet and Defra's team at the moment. By way of a bit of background, we combine all crops near Lichfield, Staffordshire. We do that under a number of different situations. We FBT some of the land, contract farm, and we also own some sort of landowners as well, some of which is in partnership with Lloyds Bank. As a farmer, I've never been a great fan of subsidies really. I think they've distorted the market for me, and I felt with my farmer hat on that all I've really done is collect them for landowners. Their value has been reflected in rents, differences in rent and tenancy agreements. But as a landowner, obviously I've benefited from them, and I've farmed under IACS, SPS, BPS, and now obviously SFI. The thing that's a little bit different about the way we farm is 15 years ago we moved to a no-tillage, regenerative agriculture kind of system. So it's probably be no surprise for much of you to hear that a lot of what's been announced in stewardship and SFI is very much along the lines of many of the things that have been done. So from my personal point of view, and I know this isn't a lot of farmers because not everyone farms in that same way, it's predominantly been quite good news, and I've seen quite a lot of opportunities in there that mean that finally some of the things that I've seen that we do, which I have no doubt that our use of cover crops and no-tillage and that change to more diversity in our cropping has delivered public goods in terms of improved water quality, more wildlife. So all the outcomes I think DEFRA are looking for are valid in my own experience there. In terms of our experience of actually applying for the schemes or whatever, we entered the pilot at the earliest possible opportunity. I wanted to get on board with exactly how it was going to work, where the opportunities were in it, and also kind of help the feedback loop that it's clear that DEFRA are listening in various ways to what farmer feedback to try and make the scheme more like what we need it to be like or what we want it to be like. I was quite disappointed initially because any of the income forgone type equations didn't stack up to us at all. So rather than not go into pilots, we still did, but we just used some of the kind of the broader standards, like the advanced soil standards, hedgerows, things that weren't taking productive land out of production because that would cost me money basically. Running a business first and foremost, and the bottom line's got to stack up on these things. We then that was a straightforward process, not complicated with DEFRA. The help and advice around it was okay, but not brilliant. But I guess being pilot, they were learning as much as we were at the time when you were calling outlines and looking for guidance on what you could and couldn't do. We then moved into a stewardship agreement, started on the 1st of January this year. To do that, quite oddly, we had to leave SFI pilot because pilot can't accommodate stewardship. And then almost instantly go back into SFI. So that was a bit of a strange situation, but I think unique to pilot. The stewardship options looked better in terms of taking land out of production. They did cover income forgone for us. So we went into quite a simple system, not really using any rotational options because we wanted to keep options open. So we used quite simple options around corner management and various margins and wildlife bird enhancement, those kind of options. And again, fairly straightforward, no kind of problems in making an application. We're now at a point where we want to add to what we're doing. There's opportunities and gross margin calculations on some of the break crops that we're doing don't stack up as well as they did. The scheme's becoming more established. I think we know where we're going with it a little bit more now. And currently looking at adding more options to our stewardship. That's less than flexible. So individually I found SFI and stewardship both relatively straightforward. The complications, the confusion comes when you're trying to combine the two standards together. Then it seems to become incredibly complicated. There's this constant concern over the double funding issue and parcels of land can't be in SFI that are in, and it all becomes a bit messy at that point. That's the area where I'm still trying to wade our way through it. I've asked questions of the helpline around some of these specific issues. They don't usually are not able to answer them. I've had better answers, to be honest, bizarrely, via things like forum and Twitter, actually, where I've actually got more information and more answers there. Something that'd be hugely helpful in the planning we've been doing this the last couple of weeks. I mean, there's no greater fan of digital or using the internet for information than myself, but some things just need a book. a scheme manual for both of these schemes would be hugely useful to refer back to. You end up with 2 computer monitors with 50 tabs open on each of them, navigating between them all, trying to check you've got the latest versions, is that right and that wrong. That area could be vastly improved. Just a good old-fashioned bit of paper really would be a manual for both. And I understand obviously it's changing, evolving all the time. That means probably lots of costly reprints, but it's just the way that I think farmers do things, really. It can't all be done on screen. So really, the other thing that's been interesting in it is I think it's January or February, there was some new standards were announced. Some numbers were put to them. In some cases, some quite open numbers. Things like the no tillage being, I think 55 to 125 pound a hectare, and precision farming in a range. There's been very little on any of that since, and that is at the moment making things very difficult to plan again, particularly with contract farming customers that are trying to budget. And it's a kind of time of year where a lot of this stuff gets fixed for the cropping year ahead. There's 3 things I've written on a bit of paper in front of me that I think have come out of this for me really all the way through. 3 things I'd like to see as the scheme, more announced about it and it evolves. The first thing is greater flexibility. We're being asked in some cases to commit to 3-year contracts or 5-year contracts in the case of stewardship, often to kind of grow crops or put land into uses that we've never done before. If it doesn't work and we're committed to 5 years of, say, a legume fallow or whatever, if that's not working for us agronomically, I'd like to see the ability to swap and change between some of the options potentially, rather than having to carry on doing something that we know doesn't work on our particular farm, because every farm is going to find different options work or don't work for them. So we need some flexibility there, I think. Also that flexibility to add to our agreements. This whole idea of having to have a separate agreement. So I'll be in one Countryside Stewardship agreement that runs that's got 4 years to run, another one's got 5 years to run, an SFI that's got 3 to run. They're all going to end at different times. They need to join up, in my opinion, and that will make it a lot easier to then understand perhaps the interactions between them, which is the other area of complexity. And some communication, I think, at times has been brilliant from DEFRA. The way they've engaged with social media, the question and answer sessions on the forum, Janet's involvement in Twitter as well. I think it's hugely appreciated by farmers that they have a direct line to talk to the people designing these schemes, but it's not always consistent. So that consistency, I think, then creates doubt over the whole scheme. If people come and go, that creates a whole doubt over, well, have they changed their mind about the scheme? Is it going to happen? I mean, there may be higher political reasons for this I don't understand sometimes, but I think farmers, we like that consistent message and consistent communication, and that's something that's missing. So those 3 things really, I'd like to leave it with: the consistency, flexibility, communication. If they keep improving those areas, I think the scheme can become something that is a positive benefit for environment, which is obviously its aims, whilst helping take some of the risk out of farm businesses. At the moment, there's been no riskier times with commodity prices, weather, and all the other factors. So this puts a bit of certainty into our business, at least, which is what previous subsidy schemes have done. So I'll leave it at that and have maximum time to ask Janet as many questions as we can.
Thank you, Clive. There were some great questions in there and lots of things that we can go with. So I'm actually going to just first, I can see you itching, there's something, but I can see the booklet there. Do you want to just talk about that very quickly, or do you want to read that in something else?
I think let's see what comes out.
Okay, fine.
Otherwise we'll be too focusing me and Clive. Let's see what comes out.
No, fine.
Yeah.
Okay, Tom, first question to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Tom Allen Stevens, Oxfordshire arable farmer. I'm in Countryside Stewardship. I've got a suggestion and then a question. I'm very interested to hear what you said, Clive, about the not having a paper thing in your hand. I felt exactly the same when I joined Countryside Stewardship. So I got the contract and I printed it out, and I also put a summary page on the back that gave all the closed periods where you're not allowed to do things. Very happy to share that by PDF if you want it. Suggestion is, you must be doing this already on the Farming Forum in terms of, and I think you're already gathering views and comments and so on from growers. There's no greater value than the actual growers themselves and the suggestions that come from those growers, and you're gathering that data. It would be great to have the ability to go into the farming forum and a bit like ChatGPT say, what do I do for ABA? And it comes up with all the answers. I don't know how far away that is.
It's not far away at all. We can do a lot of that already. I mean, what we've already done in the interim, there's been threads that Janet's been and her team have been involved in. Like all social media, there's an awful lot of noise and rubbish and opinion around it, but within that there's also some gems of really useful, valuable information. So there's a tool, a background tool that we use during the forum to extract basically all the actual direct questions to answer, to Janet that were answered. So in the resources section there is basically a summary of very specific questions asked by farmers, sometimes answered by Janet, sometimes with the honest answer of I don't know, or we need to look at that as well, which is equally useful to see, because obviously that's perhaps evolving the scheme. In terms of the AI stuff, it's something that we are doing at the moment and involved in, and what you suggest there is quite close to being reality. And I think in all aspects of our culture it's going to make massive differences to how we can actually distribute and interpret information and make sure we're getting unbiased, correct, crowd wisdom derived answers.
I want you to do Tom had the excellent question of how do we make this, can we turn the page on the rules? At the handbook.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Big slow on the uptake. On the handbook, so we've had an ongoing debate, I'll say, within about how we present this information, and we've heard a lot of feedback from farmers saying we want a handbook. The SFI information that we're about to publish will be in the form of a handbook, all of it in one thing. You can print it out and put it on your desk, which we know many farmers want to do. We've also got these lovely new things, which are, that's just SFI. These, we've got one for uplands, one for arable, one for livestock, and I think we're going to have one for horticulture, which are a booklet which has in it everything in SFI and CS that's relevant to your particular type of farm in a booklet form. There you go, Clive, there's one for you. That's the uplands one though, so I haven't got the arable one, we've got them on our stand. And those are going down well so far. At the moment we're doing short print runs of them because we're just iterating them based on feedback, so that's what we do. But there are lots of folk have been saying, oh, can I have a pile of them? We'll give them out, because that's exactly what you said, and exactly what you're saying, that's what people want. Love your idea of a summary of the agreement though, and I'd love to see what you've done there, to see can we build on that.
Thank you, Janet. So question at the back, if you could just say who you are as well when you have a question.
Thank you, Mark Wington. I'm farming in Stafford. We've got stewardship and SFI. Two questions in one really, and it was mentioned by the previous speaker. As businesses, we need some certainty. I mean, we're talking about next cropping now and buying seed, and we haven't. And the question really is, bearing in mind that uncertainty we've got, and the timescales just keep slipping. I was told 2 weeks ago it'll definitely be at the cereals where there was an announcement. I'm now told there's something in Lincolnshire in 2 weeks there might be an announcement. We need that announcement now, not next week, not by Christmas, not by 2 Christmases away. And then the next one for me is in terms of certainty. We've moved from this cap to SFI. And that's very much at the behest of central government, bearing in mind, and I'm a politician as well, but bearing in mind we've got possible changes in central government, how certain are we that if we sign up for something it's going to carry on? Sorry about the long-winded question.
Yeah. Thank you. I really do get the point about certainty being required. We published in January. We had a lot of feedback about this last year, and there was some uncertainty. I had 3 different offers in 3 months, and I know that caused a lot of worry and uncertainty and sense of, oh, is it all up in the air again? We published something in January called Environmental Land Management Update, which did have in it a list of everything we're going to pay for and how much we're going to pay, both this year and next year, which gives you a lot more of the information you need to be able to plan. In terms of what we're about to offer in SFI in this current year, there's information coming very imminently within the next week or 2. It's ready to go. We're into the realms where we have to have a slot in the government communications grid, and I wish I controlled that, but I don't. Actually, I'm glad I don't control that for the whole government, but I wish I controlled over our date, but I don't. But it will be very, very shortly, and that will flesh out the full details of how you can combine the different options together with CS, exactly what's required. There's no major changes to what you get paid, except for the low input grassland option, where there's now one price for the whole country instead of two prices for upland and lowland. Everything else is basically as it was, but we're just fleshing out the detail. In terms of what's coming beyond that, Clive, you mentioned this point as well. There are some options which we don't currently pay for that we're going to introduce, no-till being one of them, agroforestry being another, peat restoration being another, where we included them in our announcement in our publication in January, but we did put a range of prices and with some uncertainty around them. As well as getting ready to open SFI for applications, we've been hard at work fleshing those out, and the plan is to publish all of that information in much more detail in September, October time this year, so that you've got that full manual of everything all in one place. And at the same time, we're looking at how do we deal with this complexity between schemes, remove the duplication between them, and stop you having to have loads of hassle of working out how to jigsaw them together. And that's a product of just rolling out SFI alongside CS in the way that we have. For good reasons, but there are consequences to that in terms of the messiness that Clive described, and we're very well aware of that. We're working on tidying it up so that the 24 offer is much more kind of joined up together. And then in terms of change of government, you have to ask each of the political parties, obviously, what they think, but what they're saying is that they would continue with this in this general direction. They would continue rolling out these schemes. The points of debate are going to be who's going to do a better job, what size should the budget be, are there any particular aspects that need to be kind of improved. So we're trying to build this on the kind of middle ground, such that it is an endure. We're trying to build this for the next few decades so that it endures and it does provide you that clarity and certainty. But in terms of your contract, if you sign up for SFI, we can only change that contract if you agree. So if you signed up to get a certain set of prices and to do a certain set of actions for that 3 years, then that's your contract. We can only change that if in exceptional circumstances. And they are set out what those are to give you that kind of certainty that if you sign up, then you're all right. What we've done when we've changed prices in the last couple of years is that if where prices go up, we've applied that to everybody. Where they go down, if you're already in agreement, then you keep on what you are now, and then perhaps if you renew, you need to look at the new prices. Most of them gone up. I can't promise that will carry on forever, because there's always going to be tests for us to pass to show that we're getting proper value for money and we're not wasting money. But that's what we've done in the last couple of years to give you that sort of certainty and clarity. I really do appreciate that point that you're running a business here and you can't afford to hang around and wait for us. And certainly, we are not sitting on our hands thinking it doesn't matter, that's not what's going on. This is just complicated, and we do it in a wider context, and we really are going as fast as we safely can to get this done for you. And the information you're looking for will be out in the next week or two.
Thank you. Questions?
Thank you, Janet. Stafford Proctor, I'm a farmer from Sutton Bridge, South Lincolnshire. I'm a mixed farmer, I suppose, and very much looking forward to going down we are going down the regen route. So a bit like Clive, everything you've mentioned within the SFIs really sort of strikes a good chord. Now, but I do have a problem with a lack of flexibility. Now, sort of about 20 months ago, when we were all applying to become members of the pilot, or some of us were, the 900 that got on, I was told that I couldn't do it because I had a Countryside Stewardship agreement in place. So I think I pretty much surprised them by saying, okay, well, I'll cancel the Countryside Stewardship, and I had to pay back 3 years worth of funding because I wanted to be involved right from the start. And I think together, you and your department and the can-do approach that farmers have had, I think we're hopefully going to create a really good scheme. But as far as the pilot members are concerned, I wondered if you can confirm or otherwise whether people in the pilot are able to join SFI 23 and some of those standards I think I would like to join, and I don't want to have to go through the hassle of cancelling my SFI pilot and reapplying in the way that Clive had to, because it is sending out all sorts of wrong signals to encourage farmers to engage. And as far as, so I'd like an answer on that if possible, Janet. And as far as a can-do approach, and I've mentioned it to you before, your communication skills and can-do approach are marvellous. And I think if you can start to instill a bit more of that further down the chain within DEFRA, we would greatly appreciate it from where we're sitting. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your kind comments. I will say, definitely not just me. In fact, you'll see lots of people here in a green t-shirt today who are all trained and really good at communicating. We are trying to systematise that and make it just the way that we operate, so it isn't about some wacko weirdo who likes chatting to farmers, which I do, but it's actually how we work. Because that's how, what we're trying to do here is not just launch a thing and go, well, that's that done then, see you later, but we're trying to make a self-improving machine here, so that you don't need to run a programme like this in 10 years, where you chuck it all up in the air again. But instead, we're constantly evolving this to respond to the private markets as they develop, increase knowledge as that comes about, etc. And to do that, we've got to have engagement with farmers as the thing that we do first, really, to understand what's going on, what we're learning, how does this need to work. So we absolutely are all about systematising that. And also, I can't, with the best will in the world, to Clive's consistency point, I really do my best to get out and about, in person and online. I cannot do it 24 hours a day, and I reach a limit. And I am literally just one person. And I hate it that I haven't been able to be as consistent as I would like on the farming forum, and I feel terrible about it. I really hate to let people down, but I just cannot do it all myself. And so that is very important that we put that consistency in place. I absolutely appreciate that's what people want to see and should rightly expect. I personally haven't been able to deliver that, and I regret it, but I can't. Is what I have to. I just can't do it. I can't engage with every single farmer every single day and also do the rest of my job. I just can't do it. So we are trying to systematise it. And you can see the evidence today in our stand and the way that lots of our folk are around about engaging, and they all know a lot more than I do actually, so they're a lot more useful. In terms of flexibility, yes you will. Like rule number one, there's a number of rule number ones. One of the rule number ones is anybody who's adopted early and come into the pilot or SFI already cannot be at a disadvantage, and they must not feel at a disadvantage, because if they do, everyone else is watching them and going, well, let's see how it pans out for those idiots. And we'll see if it doesn't work for them, I'm not going anywhere near it. And I totally understand why that is, because we have had some real fiascos in our past, haven't we? So that's not an irrational position to take. So we need you to have a positive experience, to reward your leap of faith that you've made to take part, and your cost in your case. We need to give you a positive experience. So we've had lots of conversations about how we do that. There'll be information about that coming to you directly when we publish the information that we're going to publish shortly about how you can access the SFI 23 options. And the rules of game across schemes are, we can't pay for the same thing twice in two different schemes, because that's not really fair on anybody else who's not getting that. And that's not a good use of public money, because we're literally, that's paying twice for one thing. But other than that, you can stack things on top of each other, and there is that flexibility there. And then to Clive's point about flexibility, as it's relevant as we're going along, we're going to introduce the ability to change agreements every year. We've done it in SFI already, we're finding that works well. We're going to do it across all the other schemes. We're going to move to rolling windows across our schemes, so you can apply whenever you want. We're going to move to quarterly payments across our schemes, you get paid more frequently. And that flexibility to say, well, actually, that's not working, can I adjust it, is exactly where we want to get to. The reason we're cautious about that is we do need to show that what we're paying for is delivering results. So if everybody changed everything all the time, that would be really very difficult for us to justify the spend, when often the impact only comes after a couple of years of doing something. So we need to be careful about setting some reasonable parameters, that if you've committed to something, there is an expectation you do it unless you really can't, rather than just, oh, I'll try this and I'll try that, and then that's not a good use of public money. But we are very much in the space of wanting to enable that, because there are plenty of circumstances where something just doesn't work and we'll try something else.
Yeah, it's great to hear a lot of that, particularly about flexibility. But just to pick up on pointing that question there, which is the further into my farming career I go, the more I'm learning that being an innovator or early adopter of things doesn't tend to pay. In fact, the opposite, really. And sometimes this is made worse by a lot of DEFRA policy. With reference to the capital grants involved at the moment, I've never been able to apply for or received a grant for farming in my entire farming career, usually because what I would want to apply for I've already done 5 years earlier, and therefore can't apply for a grant in it. That's something that I'd like to see more thought put into, really, how they're constructed, and more grown up about the way in what they actually fund. Grants to kind of buy a new shiny direct drill, in my experience, just tends to put the price of new shiny direct drills up, and also destroy the second-hand market a little bit for those of us that have already got them and bought them up with our own drill. So, it's exactly the same, and it's good that if the flexibility is there, it'd be good to see that those that adopted SFI earlier or stewardship aren't locked into things that they now regret, because there's a new option that would now fit better than my AB15 or AB6. If I hadn't got that, I could do something else that's better suited to me. So it would be really good that we're not penalised for kind of our early commitment. And I think when you talk about uptake, Janet, and you want to get 70% of farmers want to get that uptake, if you don't offer that flexibility, you won't get that uptake. It's as simple as that, because people, I think the reason a lot of people are just sitting on the sidelines at the moment, waiting to see how it all comes out, they're scared of committing to something that then changes and they don't want to do anymore.
Yeah.
Thank you, Clive. I mean, will government ever be fleet of foot enough, flexible enough? Will the bureaucracy cope with the ambition? This is the great question. Question from the gentleman here.
Toby Bruce, Kew University. One part of environmental land management is reducing dependency on pesticides, and even if it wasn't, there's a lack of availability of new pesticide options. So, what is DEFRA doing to support farmers with pest, weed and disease management? Because they're caught in a very difficult position where the pace at which pesticides are being restricted or banned is much faster than the pace at which alternative approaches are coming on the market.
This is a really important question, and I'm aware, obviously, a hot topic at the moment with the wider debates about this. So we've got new options in the SFI coming for this, where you can have. Sorry, I'm looking around the thing to see you. I realise I'm training my neck. I'll talk to everybody if that's all right. Or I look a bit like a weird giraffe. I mean, I look like a weird giraffe anyway. It's even worse than I'm training my neck. We've got 4 new IPM options. One of which is similar to existing CS options, which is about margins and blocks, but take a look at that in SFI, because when we put things in SFI, the rules tend to be more flexible, there's wider eligibility, so it's worth having a look if you've not looked at that option before. So you can do margins, blocks, floriferous type things to attract predators. You can have an IPM plan where we'll pay for you nearly £1,000 to have somebody who's qualified come to your farm and help you look at your IPM. Now, you might be doing what you call an IPM plan already for your red tractor certification. This is actually paying you to have someone come to your farm and talk it through, not in a box-ticking way, but have a conversation about what your options might be. We're going to pay for companion planting and similar types of approaches in SFI. You can get £55 a hectare for that. And we're also going to pay for not using insecticide on your land. You can enter as much or as little land as you want into these options. And if you're not using insecticide, then we'll pay you £45 a hectare. And that's really important for exactly the reason that you say. If those things taken together are adopted at scale, make a huge difference to farm costs, the pressures that you're under, and also a huge difference to biodiversity in the countryside. And that's the sort of sweet spot that we're talking about, where we want to be paying for actions that are good for the business, good for food production, and good for the environment at the same time.
A lot of those options are, I mean, be no surprise from my own point of view as a farmer who's already making extensive use of cover crops, companion cropping, not using insecticides for the last 15 years or so, well down the line with precision farming, that really, you know, it's perfect for me from that respect. But I do know there's some scepticism amongst others whether they are the right ways and the way that farming should be going. But my experience is they do seem to produce the results and the public goods that this scheme is supposed to subsidise. There's absolutely no doubt that we've seen, and a lot of it's been quantified on our farm over the years by various groups and researchers, the changes to wildlife, the changes to water quality, the changes to soil have been quite dramatic. And you know, so therefore that sustainability. I didn't make those changes like some maybe will do now to get to access subsidised money. I did them because actually it's made my farm more productive, giving me a much lower fixed cost structure, so the business is more resilient as a result, and I think a lot more sustainable for future generations. So it's great that what's now being, these new standards that are coming out, I think, will produce the results, and they will be adopted as long as the payments are right for them. Because no insecticides, it's an easy thing to say, we've done it over a number of years, that hasn't been without cost to us. You know, we have suffered yield losses in some years because of that. So.
Yeah, that's partly what my point was, because you haven't got pesticide to protect how you're going to manage all those yield losses.
Yeah, exactly. So it has to be, if we're going to be asked to do those things and create those positive outcomes and results, the money still has to come from somewhere. We can't do that off our own philanthropic acts, can we?
Brilliant, thank you. Question from the lady here.
Jane Hill, Suffrage Champness. I'm a rural tax advisor, so I'm seeing firsthand the effect of the changes in the subsidies at the moment. 2 things towards guaranteed change and driving behaviour is subsidies and tax. And I have to say the farming industry have always been very entrepreneurial, And with the reduction in subsidies, then a lot of them are looking to diversify, looking at other ways of creating income, and which is great. But they also have one eye on their tax reliefs, particularly inheritance tax. And at the moment, I know we've just completed a response to consultation on environmental tax reliefs, but the lack of tax relief on some of these environmental schemes, alongside the other diversifications that farmers are actually doing now, for a lot of them it's putting their tax relief, or could put their tax relief, at risk. And as a result, it is actually driving behaviour and meaning that they're not so willing to go into these schemes. As I say, I know the consultation's I think it's just closed this last week. I just wondered what your view was on whether we might actually see something coming down the line in that respect.
I think what happened here is that we heard this feedback from farmers. It was raised in the ROC review of tenancy in particular, but others have mentioned it to us, including NFU and others, and that's why the government's consulted on it. I don't know what the outcome of that consultation is going to be, so I can't express a view on behalf of the government about that, because the whole reason to consult is to find out what are the, on the face of it, it seems like a good idea to extend these tax reliefs to include these schemes, but there's always complexity when you invest with tax, as you will well know, and that's why there was a consultation about it, to see what are those complications and how do we take this issue forward. So there will be, now that it's done, the government will look at the responses. It's actually the Treasury that lead on this sort of policy, but we of course have input into that from a farming policy perspective, and then the outcome will come out in due course. So I don't know what the outcome will be. I haven't read all responses, but that's why we did the consultation, to recognise that issue.
And Clive, the incentive is in the scheme name. What is your greatest incentive? Is it public money? Is it tax? Is it the markets? What incentivises you?
Well, as I say, I didn't make the changes we made to the way that we farm to access subsidies. They weren't there. But as I've seen the improvements it's made, I will admit that it's been frustrating for the last 10, 15 years to be doing things that you know are benefiting everybody, every member of society, but not being paid for them. The only way I've managed to derive any benefit to date, pre these standards of control stewardship, from the way that we farm is through monetising carbon sales. And that's something that I think I've asked Janet the question before, that to clarify that obviously there's not going to be a situation where, if we're selling privately to private carbon markets, that affects our stewardship or SFI. And I think that's been answered previously to say that no, you're kind of happy for those markets to find their own balance and evolve themselves. At the moment, for me, the incentive is de-risking the business a little bit. We're farming through extremely volatile times and things that we're not in control of anymore. We can be fantastic farmers, but we can't control the weather, and we can't control what nutcases in Russia decide to do or don't do in the news tomorrow. That can swing things hugely either way. The profitability or loss of a farm last year wasn't down to how many tons a hectare you grew. It was down to when you bought your fertiliser and when you sold your grain. It was as simple as that. And that's, if that's not running a business, you may as well go to Monte Carlo or Ladbrokes if that's how you want to kind of make a living, basically. It's that kind of swing. So for me, really, my incentive is it's trying to put an element of certainty into my business, but with clearer conscience than I think I've ever had before under other subsidies, where being paid to produce food that I'm selling anyway has never felt quite as comfortable as I don't at least feel that SFI and stewardship is paying me for something, it's taking taxpayers' money off taxpayers for something that will benefit them, will offset their 3 holidays to Benidorm a year, or driving their V8 Range Rover or whatever. So it feels more right than before to take that money than ever I felt with just food production based subsidy.
And Janet, a key element of these schemes is that they're voluntary.
Yes.
And so you're going to look at these, and how are you going to pull the levers you have? Are they well funded enough? How are you going to address whether it's working, not working, whether you're putting the money in the right places? How are you, in a voluntary scheme, how are you going to manage it in the future?
Yeah, well, that's the kind of million-pound question. The things that we think, based on all of our engagement with farmers and all of our social research and all of our feedback that we have, that need to be in place for farmers to want to do these things, which is what needs to happen if they're voluntary, are that they need to make good business sense for you to do, because you're running businesses. You're not going to do something that makes no business sense. It needs to be good business practice. It needs to be not putting your business at risk. So if you think you're at risk of some kind of ridiculous fine, even though you've done everything you're supposed to do in good faith, then you're not going to enter into the scheme. Whereas if you think it's going to be fair, then you will. And then if you can see results for your business and for the environment, when farmers can see those results, then they often, once they've got into a scheme, they see the results and then think, oh, I want to do more of this, I want to go further, and then they've got to be able to have the flexibility, exactly as you say, Clive, to respond to that. To respond to something hasn't worked, something has worked, I want to do more, I want to do less, I want to change what I'm doing, I want to expand my ambition over here, or whatever it is. But also the flexibility to say, well, actually on my particular farm, I want to try doing it this way, instead of the way that you think it should be done, and that's why we're taking a much less prescriptive approach to the schemes. And instead of saying, here is the particular seed mix that you must use and plant it on this day, we're saying, have winter cover in place with at least a couple of species in it. You might want to think about these ones, but if you've got a better idea for your particular farm, have at it and make sure what you're doing seems reasonable. So you've got to have that flexibility, and you've got to be able to encompass it as part of your business, so that they're not seeing the subsidies, they're seeing as another good that you're selling. You're selling food privately, and you're selling public goods publicly, and that's a kind of combination of different sources of income, and that's how I want you to see it. In terms of, so that's what we think the necessary conditions of success are. If you think you've got some other ones, then let us know, and we're all ears, because we're always trying to make sure what we're doing is going to work for you. But in terms of how we only ever have a hypothesis, really. We don't know until we roll something out how it's going to land. So we're always in experiment mode, actually, to say, well, our hypothesis is if we change SFI in this way, to make it more flexible, allow you to pick and mix, make the prices more transparent, make it broader, then more farmers will find it attractive. We'll see, won't we? We'll find out when we roll it out exactly how many farmers find it attractive, which options you take, which ones you don't, whether you do them in the sort of combinations that need to happen to get the outcomes that we want to see, and if not, what do we need to do to encourage and incentivise you to do that? Whether you do come in at one level and stay there, or actually do escalate each year, these are all things that we've got to see how it pans out. And the whole point of this endeavour was that we do now have that flexibility. We've got the flexibility to flex the budget, so if we see more demand for a particular grant, or less demand for a particular option, that's fine, because we can flex the budget accordingly. And we've got plans A to Z and through 1 to 100 for how we use the budget, so that if, like, how much uncertainty is there in each line, and what we're going to do if it's above or below the line on each one, so we can make sure we do maintain that spend. So we've got the flexibility on the budget, we've got the flexibility on the policy, we've got the feedback loops to engage with farmers and understand what's happening and see the data. All of those are a constant effort to improve them, because it's a very new way of working for us. So I'm absolutely not sitting here claiming we've got that nailed, we don't. But we're doing better at it now than we were a year or two ago, and we'll be doing better at it in another year's time than we are now, because every day we're trying to make it better. And really, the answer to your question is, every single day, when I get out of bed, I think, what can I just make a bit better today? And that's what I want everybody involved to do. And if we all do that, then we'll make everything awesome eventually, won't we? If every single person makes something better every single day, and if we all do that, and that's what's driving us, then we'll get there eventually. And we can only do that with you telling us what you think, though. So please don't give up on us. We don't always get everything right. We often, in fact, I certainly personally cock it up a lot more times than I get it right, but we're always trying to learn and improve, just like you are as farmers, and we really respect what you're doing and want to engage with you, and really enjoy it too, as I can say.
Thank you, Janet. And Clive, look, you've only seen the headline numbers in SFI, but are the payment rates enough? Is the scheme well funded enough? How important is an element of profit in the scheme to you as a business?
It's got to be profitable. I mean, the income for gone thing, which I think we've kind of moved beyond that debate a little bit, where that was never good enough, because you can't survive just on that income for gone. You need the profit in the business. I mean, I've always taken a very running the farm as a business approach. So we make the right decisions and balance risk, as much as we can within it. So it's really important that it's more than just that. Not just a de-risking situation, not just a comfort blanket, something to fall back on. If we're providing benefit, we should pay properly for providing those benefits.
And Janet, the Minister was here yesterday. He did make some comment about income foregone. I mean, is it actually relevant? Does it matter to elves?
I think when people talk about income foregone, which is the way we calculate what prices we pay in schemes, is we work out how much it's going to cost you to do this action, and are you going to take any sort of yield hit or income hit, and if so, how much is that going to be? And then we add that up, and that makes the price. And we do it based on a national average. And the benefit of that is that it incentivises you to put the actions on the least productive areas of your farm, because then you're minimising the actual income foregone cost to you, so that you can maximise your margin. This tends to be a proxy for that. So there's always a debate about, is that the right method to calculate? We haven't found a better option to calculate the kind of base level payment, and that's why we're still doing that. But it tends to be a proxy for, are these prices actually, do they stack up for me? and we've got to make sure the prices do stack up. And one of the problems with income forgone is that we didn't update the prices for 8 years in Countryside Stewardship, and that meant they got really behind. So we have updated them twice in the last 2 years to try and keep them a bit more up to date with how prices are evolving, and that makes them a bit more workable for people. But the other thing we're going to do, which we've said in January in our publication, is we're going to have premium payments through CS Plus, so that you get your standard sort of price based on income forgone plus costs, and I do think that's likely to persist, because that is the least worst, like democracy, it's the least worst option. But then you can get premium payments if you do things in the right combinations to achieve really good results, or if you join up with your neighbours, or if you do things in a way that's in the right place to achieve results. So for example, on trees at the moment, if you plant a tree, you get a certain price. If you plant some trees in a way that protect a watercourse and provide public access as well, or whatever, then you can get bonus payments. And we want that model seems to be working well. We want to apply that more broadly. So there'll be more to say about how that will work later this year. But if you want to earn more through schemes than that standard rate, you'll be able to get access to those premium payments, and that helps us target the money in a way that's going to achieve the policy outcomes that we want to see. It gives you an incentive to do things in the combinations that are really going to do results and get the results that you want to see, but also it means that you've got the opportunity to earn more if you want to. But as the base level payment, it seems fair and reasonable to say, what's it actually going to cost you to do this, and how are you going to lose any income, and if so, then we should compensate you for that. And there's all sorts of complicated implications if you do it differently to that, which I think are probably not desirable. So I think the real question is, do these prices stack up, and does it make business sense for me to do this? And that's a broader set of questions than just is the way we calculate it right. So that's how I normally interpret that question. I think we've got prices in a better place now, most people are saying, but there's more to do on the premiums, and there'll be more to say about that later this year.
Yeah, just want to say on that, I think a lesson that we've all really learned more than ever in this last 12 months is what actually is income forgone. In the last 12 months, I've sold wheat at £350 a tonne, and I've also sold wheat at £190 a tonne. Right now, you could look at a situation with gross margins, and AB6, for instance, has got a better gross margin than growing a crop of oilseed rape. But if I put that into a 5-year agreement, oilseed rape may be, due to some case in Russia, may be worth £1,000 a tonne again in a year or so's time. Who knows? So it's almost impossible to define unless the scheme is a year at a time, and it can't be when it's rotational. So.
Can I just say a quick word on that? Sorry.
No,
a very quick word on that. So what we do is we calculate the prices based on averages over 3 years and trends rather than what's it doing today. And I'm sometimes asked, why don't we index link the prices in schemes? And there's 2 reasons for that. One, I don't have an index linked budget, funnily enough. But also, 2, more importantly, that's not very helpful, because exactly as you were saying, Clive, often farmers will use these schemes as a way of having a certain stable income as part of their business to offset volatility in other areas of your business. So if you know that over 5 years you're going to get X amount of money for doing this thing, then you've got some of your business that's got a certain stable income, and then when OSR prices go up and down, or input prices go up and down, you can hedge that off. And so I think this is always all about a balance of different considerations, and always, there's never a very obvious binary question with a clear, obvious answer that's like stupid. Because a no-brainer, there is no such thing as a no-brainer in this game. It's all about balance and trading off different considerations to try and make it work for as many people as possible, as well as possible, and that's why it's got to be an ongoing effort to keep tweaking it, just like you would on your farm practice. You have an overall plan, don't you? And you tweak it each year based on the weather and how it's going and how you feel about it and what you're seeing by way of results, and we've got to do that same thing with these schemes.
So you're saying it's an element of guaranteed income?
Yeah.
Okay. Mike, please.
Yeah, Mike Wilkins. I'm farming down in Wiltshire, Gloucestershire, about just shy of 4,000 acres. As of next year, will be almost 20% in Countryside Stewardship, and hopefully going into the new SFI this autumn. Completely agree with the direction of travel of what SFI is trying to achieve, and stewardship and elms in general.
Great time to retire.
Very supportive of that. I was going to ask, and you partially answered the question, about whether you think income forgone plus costs as a funding model gives adequate public money value for the public goods that are being created, because to my mind the public good that is being created is not being given an adequate value by that form of funding. The premium within Countryside Stewardship that you mentioned sounds really exciting, really positive. What is that coming into SFI? Will it be factored into SFI? And then a broader question around flexibility on the two is on, for example, around pesticides and the other points that have been mentioned. I've spoken to a lot of farmers who are very concerned about tying themselves into those agreements when we don't know seasonally what's going to happen in the year. Why would we not be able to look at an SFI model whereby we put in our application based on best practice of what we want to achieve, and review when we submit our claim at the end of the year, because of seasonal variation we were not able to do X, Y or Z to the full scope. Can we claim less money, but still to give us the dynamism of making those decisions on farm? Otherwise we're just ending up claiming those payments on things we're doing anyway, rather than making decisions.
We are coming up on nearly an hour, so.
I'll be quick. There's quite a few different questions. I won't comment further on it for long because that's all right. Because I feel we covered that with the premiums, and that's the answer to that. That's the answer to that question. I think on the pesticides point, there is provision in schemes. If you find that you can't do the thing that you committed to for whatever reason, then you can bring the RPA and say, I can't do this, and then you can have what's called a derogation. And sometimes we issue blanket derogations. So we did that last year in respect of the drought, when it was obvious that nobody was going to be able to do certain things. We just said, don't worry about it, you don't need to do that this year, because obviously it's not going to happen. So there is provision to do that. We want to keep that reserved for if you really couldn't do it though, rather than if you just can't be bothered or don't feel like it, because we've got to have some sense that we're committing money to achieve outcomes here. And if it's entirely just like, did I feel like it, did I not, that makes it very difficult for us to justify that spend. But there is provision. It's called change of circumstances, and you can contact the RPA and say, actually, I just couldn't do it because I had pestilence or disease or drought or whatever. And then the idea is nowadays you can expect a reasonable conversation when you do that, so a reasonable response. And that we are getting feedback that people are seeing that play through. But again, that's a deep change, and it's not going to be perfect all the time ever. And if it's not, then you need to sweep, and we can do something about it.
So final question time. We are trying to do something. I'm going to throw to you first, Clive. We are trying to do something in England that has never been done before, and pretty much is the first in the world. At the start of this, do you feel positive about it? Do you think it's going to work? Are we on the right track?
Yes, I think, on balance. The devil, as always, is in the detail, though. I think that's really the make or break of this. But I think the will and the attitude is there to get it right. Hopefully, potential changes of government don't, like a snake and ladders type effect, and we go right back to a start on things like this, because it's impossible. It's understanding farming. You can't farm 1 year at a time, so you can't design schemes that work 1 year at a time. And understanding that's really important, I think. So yeah, overall, I'm pretty positive about it. I think, seeing the changes I've seen, if they can be expanded over larger areas of farmland, it's definitely positive for the environment. The debate of environment versus food security and whatever is a whole different area. There's that more view that we shouldn't be doing these things, we should be becoming more self-sufficient in food. But yeah, just in relation to how the schemes are going, I think they're heading in the right direction, but devil in the detail.
So I think I know what you're going to say, Janet, but are we the guinea pigs, or are you taking us in the right way?
Well, I'd like to think so, but I certainly wouldn't claim everything's perfect, and we're not going to be done until we're a lot closer to perfect, and we're probably never going to be perfect. And I certainly would. I'm not here to sell you kind of used car that doesn't work. Like we know we've got a lot more to do. I think we are going in the right direction. What I personally find really encouraging is farmers who have reservations and are prepared to have a chat with me anyway. And I'm always hugely grateful for that, because that's like today, the last 2 days here, I've learned more in 2 days than I normally would in several weeks in the office, and that's why I get out and about as much as I do, and that's what heartens me. I think there's a lot of people already doing what we want to see. There's a lot of people leading the way. There's somebody said earlier, farmers are the most innovative, entrepreneurial, multi-skilled bunch of people I've ever come across in any sector I've worked in. And I often say to my colleagues as well, you get me crying a minute, there's no sector that every single person in the country relies upon every single day like they do on farmers. And that is profound, to me very deeply meaningful, and it gives me real hope that when we're not going in the right direction, there's constructive hope that will tell us, and we've got to set ourselves up to be kind of brave about saying when we've not done it right, and we've got to change and adapt, and that's what we've got to do, and then that I think we'll do it if we all do it together. I don't want to sound like I'm trying to sing a song or something, but I do think Like, don't look. I'm not going to solve. I'm certainly not going to solve this on my own. We've got a great load of people working on this, and RPA, NE, and other places, and DEFRA. We've got to do this together. We've got to keep on working on it together to make it work.
Okay, thank you very much. So look, just to sum up, it's pretty clear. We want as little complexity as possible. We want as much flexibility, consistency, and well-funded options as possible. For me personally, I will be fascinated what the conversation is going to be in 12 months' time. I hope to be at Cereals here in 12 months' time, seeing how it's gone, how many have applied, and where the conversation has moved on to, and I'm really looking forward to that. Look, can I thank both our speakers, Janet and Clive? It's been an excellent debate. Can I thank you?